forced to marry a secretive millionaire single dad. But on their wedding night, she found out who he really was. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. All right, let us get back to our main character. The rain was falling hard over downtown Seattle that night, beating against the coffee shop windows like restless fingers. Inside, the air smelled of espresso and warm pastries. At a corner table, Elena Morris, 26, sat with her coat still damp, clutching the strap of her worn leather bag as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Her rent was overdue, her younger brother's tuition unpaid, and every call from the landlord felt like a countdown. Across from her sat Gabriel Ward, the man who could change all of that. His gray suit looked untouched by the storm. The glow of the overhead light cut sharp lines across his face. Handsome, disciplined, unreadable. He had built a reputation as a quiet investor, a single father who kept to himself. But tonight, his voice was steady, almost cold, as he spoke. "Marry me," he said simply. "Think of it as a contract." Elena froze, unsure if she had heard correctly. "A contract?" Her voice trembled. "Yes," Gabriel replied. "You will have financial security. I will have stability for my son. 6 months, and then we part ways. No emotions, no expectations." The words hit like a chill. She had come here for a job interview at least. That was what the email had said. Now she was staring at a man proposing a marriage that sounded more like a legal transaction than a union. Elena forced a laugh, half disbelief, half fear. "You cannot be serious. You do not even know me." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "You are a tutor. You have no criminal record. You care for children. That is all I need to know." She wanted to stand, to walk out into the storm and leave this absurdity behind. But then she thought of her brother's school notice, the red ink circling, "Last warning." She thought of her mother's old apartment, now one missed payment away from eviction. "What happens if I say no?" she asked softly. He looked down at the untouched coffee between them. "Then I find someone else. But my son likes you, and that is rare. He trusts almost no one. And writing myself, there in Mare Offar." Elena's heart sank. She had met little Ethan Ward only once, during her trial day as his reading tutor. A quiet boy with wide gray eyes, just like his father's. He had clung to her hand when she left, whispering, "Please come back." The memory made her throat tighten. She looked at Gabriel again. His expression had not changed, but something flickered in his eyes, something that almost looked like desperation, carefully buried under control. "This is insane," she whispered. "Perhaps," he said, "but it is the only solution I see." He slid a folder across the table. "These are the terms. Read them." Elena hesitated before opening it. The pages smelled faintly of expensive paper and ink. 5 conditions stood out in bold letters. 1. No interference in personal business. 2. No entry into the master bedroom. 3. Maintain privacy at all times. 4. Attend public events as Mrs. Ward when required. 5. Divorce after 6 months, amicably. Her pulse quickened. It was all there in black and white. No love, no warmth, no promise of anything beyond duty. She looked up. "Why me?" Gabriel's answer came quiet but firm. "Because you need saving, and I need a wife. Let us not pretend either of us believes in fairy tales." The cafe light flickered as thunder rolled outside. Elena's eyes dropped to the contract again. Ink, paper, and the faint tremor in her hand, one signature away from changing her entire life. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "If I agree, what happens next?" Gabriel stood, placing a check on the table, more money than she had ever seen at once. "We get married on Friday. Discretion is everything. From that day on, you are Mrs. Gabriel Ward." He turned to leave, but then paused, his back to her. "And one more thing," he said quietly. "Do not ask about my past. It is better that way." The doorbell chimed as he walked out into the rain. Elena sat frozen, staring at the contract in front of her, the check beside it glistening under the amber light. The storm outside seemed to echo the storm inside her chest. She told herself it was just 6 months, Just a signature, just survival. But deep down, something whispered this was not just a deal. This was the beginning of something she could never undo. The next morning, the rain had finally stopped, but the clouds still hung low over the city like a warning. Elena stood outside the courthouse in a borrowed beige coat, holding a bouquet of pale lilies that looked as nervous as she felt. The chill in the air seeped through her gloves. She had not slept the entire night, replaying Gabriel's offer over and over until exhaustion won. Now she was here, about to marry a man she barely knew. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly as she followed the clerk down the hall. Everything felt sterile, impersonal. A few signatures, a few words, and her name would change forever. At the end of the corridor, Gabriel waited. He wore the same kind of suit as the night they met, precise and immaculate, as though he had planned every second of this moment. He looked at her briefly and nodded. "Thank you for coming on time," he said. His tone was polite, distant. Elena managed a small, steady voice. "I keep my promises." They stood before the officiant. No music, no guests, no photographs. Just the echo of the clerk's voice reciting legal vows that sounded more like business terms than words of love. When it was her turn to speak, her throat went dry. She forced out the words anyway. "I do." Gabriel slipped the simple gold ring onto her finger. His hand was warm, steady. For a moment, his eyes softened. Then the mask returned. The officiant declared them husband and wife. Just like that, Elena Morris became Mrs. Gabriel Ward. When they stepped outside, the drizzle had returned. A black car waited at the curb. Gabriel opened the door for her without a word. The ride to his estate took nearly an hour. The silence between them thick as fog. Elena watched the streets shift from crowded blocks of small shops to quiet, tree-lined roads and iron gates. When they reached the mansion, the sheer size of it made her heart stop. The house stood at the top of a hill overlooking the water, its stone facade gleaming like something from another century. As she stepped out, the air smelled faintly of pine and rain-soaked earth. The front doors swung open before they reached them. A middle-aged housekeeper bowed slightly. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ward," she said kindly. The words hit harder than expected. Home. It did not feel like one. Inside, the foyer stretched endlessly, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with framed photographs of places, not people. Elena followed Gabriel up the staircase, her footsteps echoing behind his. "This will be your room," he said, stopping at a doorway near the end of the hall. The room was large, elegant, and cold. "Mine is down the corridor. The staff knows to give you space. Dinner is at 7. Elena nodded slowly. "Thank you, I suppose." He gave a faint, polite smile, then turned to leave. She wanted to ask something, anything, but the words died in her throat. When the door closed behind him, silence filled the room again. She set her bag on the vanity table and stared at herself in the mirror. The gold ring caught the afternoon light, glinting like a promise she had not meant to make. That evening, she found her way to the dining hall. The table stretched longer than her old apartment. Gabriel sat at the far end, cutting his food with quiet precision. A fire burned in the massive stone fireplace, yet the air still felt cold. "How is the room?" he asked without looking up. "It is too big," she said honestly. He glanced at her, a small flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You will get used to it." They ate mostly in silence. At one point, she heard a door open down the hall and small footsteps running. A boy's voice called, "Dad?" Gabriel stood immediately, his entire demeanor changing. His face softened in a way Elena had not seen before. A boy, no older than 7, ran into the room and wrapped his arms around his father. Elena froze. It was Ethan, the quiet child she used to tutor. His eyes brightened when he saw her. "Miss Elena." Gabriel looked between them, momentarily caught off guard. "You two know each other?" Ethan nodded quickly. "She helped me with my reading. She is the best tutor ever." For the first time that day, Gabriel smiled, a real one. "Then I suppose you will fit in here better than I thought," he said. Elena felt something shift inside her. For a moment, the mansion did not feel so empty. But as she glanced at Gabriel again, that softness was gone, replaced by the same guarded expression. Later that night, as she lay in the unfamiliar bed, she could still hear Ethan's laughter echoing down the hall, and beneath that sound, a quieter thought whispered in her mind. What exactly had she married into? Days turned into weeks, and the house that once felt like a museum slowly began to breathe again. Every morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting soft gold over the marble floor. Elena fell into a rhythm she never expected: breakfast with Ethan, reading lessons in the library, long silent dinners with Gabriel. The silence was not hostile, just heavy, like a wall neither of them dared to cross. She noticed how precisely Gabriel lived. Every hour was accounted for, every action measured. He left early for his company's downtown office, returned by dusk, and often spent the evenings in his study behind a locked door. Once, she passed by and heard a faint piano melody drifting from within a song so gentle it made her pause. She wanted to knock, to ask, but one of the contract rules came back to her: do not enter his private space. Her world became the west wing of the mansion, Ethan's laughter, and the quiet staff who spoke in whispers. At night, she sat by the window, sketching the view of the bay, her only way to stay connected to herself. But even that small piece carried a shadow. Each time she glanced at the gold band on her finger, she felt both safe and trapped. One afternoon, Ethan burst into her room, holding a small drawing. "Look, Miss Elena, it is us, me, Dad, and you." Elena smiled and took the paper. The three stick figures stood under a crooked sun, all holding hands. Above them, Ethan had written in uneven letters, "Family." Her heart squeezed painfully. She crouched down beside him. "It is beautiful, Ethan." He grinned proudly. "Dad said you are helping him too. He is not so serious anymore." Elena blinked. "He said that?" Ethan nodded. "He even smiled when I told him you like pancakes." Then he ran off toward the garden before she could reply. That evening, during dinner, she dared to speak. "Ethan told me you can play the piano." Gabriel's knife froze mid-cut. "He talks too much," he said quietly, but there was a hint of a smile. "I think it is wonderful," she continued. "Music is a kind of truth, do you not think so?" Gabriel met her eyes across the table. For a brief second, the distance between them seemed to dissolve. Then he looked away. "Truth is overrated, Mrs. Ward. People prefer what sounds beautiful, even when it is false." The way he said it carried weight. Something wounded hid behind that calm tone. She wanted to ask more, but his gaze warned her not to. After dinner, as she walked back to her room, she found Ethan waiting in the hallway, holding a thick sketchbook. "Miss Elena, can you read me a bedtime story in Dad's room? He always says he is busy." Her instinct was to say no, remembering rule number 2, no entry into the master bedroom. But the boy's hopeful eyes made her hesitate. "All right," she whispered. They tiptoed down the hall and pushed the door open. The room smelled faintly of cedar and cologne. A single lamp glowed near the large piano by the window. On the desk were stacks of letters tied with navy ribbons, and beside them, a photograph of a woman with kind eyes and auburn hair. Ethan climbed onto the bed while Elena stood frozen, staring at the photo. "That is my mom," Ethan said softly. "She went to heaven." Elena knelt beside him. "She was very beautiful. She used to sing when Dad played piano," he added. "He does not play anymore." Before she could answer, the door opened. Gabriel stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Ethan quickly said, "Dad, Miss Elena was just reading me a story." Gabriel's eyes softened at his son, then shifted to Elena. "It is all right, you may stay." He walked to the piano, sat down, and began to play. The sound was low at first, then fuller, filling the room with warmth that wrapped around them like light. Ethan drifted to sleep within minutes. Elena stood quietly, watching Gabriel's profile under the lamp glow. The music carried something raw: grief, love, guilt. When he finally stopped, he whispered without looking at her, "She died 3 years ago. A car crash. I was driving." Elena's heart ached. "I am so sorry." He turned to her, his voice steady but tired. "Now you know why this house has rules. Some walls are built to keep memories in, not people out." He rose and covered his son with a blanket. For the first time, Elena saw the man behind the contract, not a cold millionaire, but a father who was still learning how to live with his own ghosts. That night, as she walked back to her room, the melody from his piano lingered in her mind. Something inside her had shifted again, quietly and irreversibly. The next few days in the Ward mansion passed in a strange quiet. Something had changed since that night in Gabriel's room. The air between him and Elena was no longer cold, only fragile, like glass that could shatter with one wrong word. He still left early every morning, still worked behind closed doors, but now he paused at breakfast to ask if she had slept well. He lingered longer when Ethan talked about his day. Elena tried to convince herself that it meant nothing, that she was only fulfilling her part of the contract, but her heart did not listen. Every small act of kindness, a door opened for her, a faint smile, the way he looked at Ethan stayed with her longer than it should have. One afternoon, while she was in the garden helping Ethan plant sunflowers, a woman arrived in a silver car. She was tall, perfectly dressed, her heels sinking slightly into the wet grass. Elena recognized her from the newspapers. Marissa Hale, one of Gabriel's business partners, and rumored to be much more. "Mrs. Ward, is it?" Marissa said smoothly, her smile polite but sharp. "I heard the good news. Congratulations on your arrangement." Elena froze, unsure how much the woman knew. "Thank you," she replied cautiously. Marissa's gaze flicked toward the mansion. "You must know Gabriel never does anything without a reason. Do not mistake formality for affection." Elena forced a smile, though her stomach turned. "I am aware of the terms." Marissa tilted her head, satisfied. "Good. Then you will not be surprised when this contract ends exactly as it began, without sentiment." She turned and walked back to her car, her perfume lingering in the air like a warning. That night, Elena could not sleep. Her mind replayed the conversation again and again. When Gabriel returned home, she waited in the hallway. "You could have told me," she said quietly. He looked tired, unguarded. "Told you what?" "That people think I am just another transaction." Gabriel sighed, loosening his tie. "People will always think what suits them best. I do not answer to gossip." "But I do," she said, her voice trembling. "They whisper when I walk into a room. They look at me like I bought my place beside you." He stepped closer, his tone calm but firm. "You wanted this, Elena. You signed that paper." "I did it to survive," she shot back. "Not to be humiliated." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Gabriel's voice softened. "You are not a humiliation. You are the only person who makes this house feel alive again." The words stunned her into silence. He looked as if he regretted saying them, but it was too late. Something in her chest ached in response. The next morning, Gabriel told her there would be a charity gala that evening. "You will need to attend as my wife," he said. "The press will be there." By sunset, Elena found herself in a silver gown, her hair swept up, her reflection almost unrecognizable. Gabriel waited downstairs in a black suit, looking every bit the powerful man she had married. When he offered his arm, she hesitated before taking it. The gala glittered with chandeliers and cameras. Photographers called Gabriel's name, flashes painting his face in harsh white light. He guided her through the crowd with quiet confidence, yet she could feel eyes on her, the whispered comments, the curious stares. During the dinner, a board member made a mocking remark. "I must say, Gabriel, your taste in companions has become charitable." Laughter rippled through the table. Elena's face flushed, but before she could speak, Gabriel's hand found hers under the table, steady and protective. Then she stood up calmly, her voice clear. "Charity is about seeing worth where others refuse to look. Perhaps you should attend more of these events, you might learn something." The laughter stopped. The man's smirk vanished. Across the table, Gabriel's expression changed. Pride flickered in his eyes. When the evening ended, the car ride home was silent. As they stepped into the mansion, Gabriel spoke first. "You handled yourself well tonight." She looked at him, her heart still racing. "I did not do it for you." "I know," he said quietly. "That is why it mattered." He started up the stairs, then turned back. "Good night, Elena." For the first time, he used her name, not Mrs. Ward, not you, just Elena. It was a small thing, but it echoed in her chest long after he disappeared down the hall. That night, she stood by her window, the moonlight tracing silver across the bay. Somewhere inside the house, a piano key sounded soft, hesitant, almost like a question, and for the first time, she wished the contract had never existed at all. The following morning, the mansion felt different. The staff moved quietly, as if something sacred had been disturbed. Elena could still hear echoes of the piano from the night before, faint notes that had followed her into her dreams. She told herself to ignore it, to remember the rules, to remember that all of this would end in a few months. But her heart had already crossed that line. Ethan found her in the kitchen, his backpack hanging loosely over one shoulder. Dad said you are coming to my school fair today, he said, his face bright with excitement. Elena blinked. He did? The boy nodded. He never goes to these things, but he said we will all go together, like a real family. Her heart softened. Then I guess I had better find something to wear. Later that afternoon they arrived at the school fair. The sun was warm, the air filled with the smell of popcorn and cotton candy. For the first time, Gabriel was not surrounded by assistants or reporters. He was just a man holding his son's hand. Elena watched as Ethan pulled him toward the game booths, laughing freely. Gabriel looked awkward at first, but when Ethan insisted he try the ring toss, he did and won. The small plastic prize, a red toy car, made Ethan cheer. Gabriel laughed, a sound Elena had never heard before unrestrained. Real. She could not help smiling. For a moment they truly looked like a family. But the peace did not last. As they walked back to the parking lot, Marissa Hale appeared again, her sunglasses glinting in the afternoon sunday. I see the performance is going well, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Gabriel's expression hardened. Marissa, not here. It man around her was. Oh, I think this is the perfect place, she replied. Do you really think people believe this farce? Everyone knows she is just your paid wife. How long before the media does too? Elena felt her face burn, but Gabriel stepped in front of her. Enough, he said sharply. Leave her out of this. Marissa's smile turned cold. You cannot protect her from everything, Gabriel. Secrets have a way of finding the light. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. The car ride home was silent. Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, clutching his toy car. Elena stared out the window, the reflection of her own worried face staring back. Is she right? She asked quietly. Do people think I am nothing but a fraud? Gabriel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. People will think whatever gives them power. You do not owe them the truth. She turned to him. And what about your truth? What is it you are still hiding? His eyes flickered toward her, then back to the road. Some truths do not heal. They destroy. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When they reached the mansion, Gabriel went straight to his study. Elena stood in the hallway, her pulse still racing. Something inside her told her that Marissa was not just jealous. She knew something real, something dangerous. That evening, she saw a file left on the entryway table. It had fallen halfway out of Gabriel's briefcase. Against her better judgment, she picked it up. Inside were legal documents, custody papers, financial records, and a sealed letter bearing the logo of a hospital. The date made her chest tighten. It was from the week of the car accident that killed his wife. Before she could read further, Gabriel's voice came from behind her. What are you doing? Elena turned, startled. I just saw it on the table. He took the file from her hands, his jaw tight. You have no right to go through my personal documents. I was not Gabriel. Please, I only wanted to understand what you are hiding. His expression darkened. This was not part of the agreement. It is an of her, and it not of the P-blast, very causative. Her eyes filled with tears. I am your wife, even if only on paper. You owe me honesty. He took a long breath, his voice quiet but cold. You wanted safety. I gave you that. Do not ask for more than what you signed up for. He turned and walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the marble hall. Elena stood frozen, her heart pounding. The walls that had once felt protective now seemed to close in around her. For the first time since the marriage began, she felt truly like an outsider. That night, when she looked out her window toward the dark water beyond the hill, she realized something undeniable. She had fallen in love with a man who was still haunted by someone else. And the secret he was guarding might destroy everything she had begun to believe in. The next morning the mansion was silent again, but this time the silence felt sharp, like glass after a storm. Gabriel had already left for the office, and Ethan was still asleep. Elena sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the folded blanket in her hands. Every word from the night before replayed in her mind, his anger, his distance, and the look in his eyes when he said she had asked for more than she deserved. She knew she had crossed a line, but curiosity was not what drove her anymore. It was care. She needed to know why a man who loved his son so fiercely still lived like a ghost. Hours later, the housekeeper brought her a small envelope. Mr. Ward asked me to give you this, the woman said quietly. Elena unfolded the note. It was written in Gabriel's neat handwriting. I will be away for 2 days on business. Please take care of Ethan. I will explain everything when I return. She read it twice, unsure whether to believe the promise or fear what it meant. That evening, Ethan joined her in the kitchen to bake cookies, his laughter echoing through the high ceilings. Dad never lets me eat dough, he said proudly, licking the spoon. Elena smiled. Well, tonight is different. For a moment, the house felt warm again, but later, as she tucked Ethan into bed, she saw headlights sweeping across the windows. A car pulled into the driveway, sleek, unfamiliar. Her pulse quickened when the front door opened, and Marissa Hale stepped inside without knocking. Elena met her at the foot of the staircase. What are you doing here? Marissa's smile was ice. I came to collect what should have been mine. I think you should leave, Elena said firmly. Marissa's gaze darted toward the study. Gabriel is not the man you think he is. He was the reason his wife died. She found out about the merger that would have ruined hundreds of families. She tried to stop him. He drove her off the road that night. It masked as sass. It masked in positive. Elena's breath caught. That is a lie, Marissa shrugged. Then ask him yourself. The hospital report you found? That was his alibi. Bought and signed by his lawyer. She leaned closer, her perfume thick and cloying. You think you are saving him, but you are just another shield he hides behind. Before Elena could respond, the sound of small footsteps came from the hall. Ethan stood there, rubbing his eyes. Miss Elena? Why is she here? Marissa straightened. Go to bed, child. Adults are talking. Elena's voice turned sharp. Do not speak to him that way. Marissa smirked. See? You are already acting like the perfect wife. Too bad the marriage is fake. Then she walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. When the door shut, Ethan looked up at Elena, confused. Is what she said true? Is the marriage fake? Elena knelt and pulled him into her arms. No, sweetheart, you do not have to worry about any of that. But inside, her chest burned. The boy's question hit deeper than she could admit. Later that night, she sat by the window, watching the storm gather over the bay again. Her thoughts raced in circles. If what Marissa said was true, then everything, the kindness, the music, even the small smiles, was built on lies. But if it was false, then someone was trying to destroy him, and she could not let that happen. At midnight, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Gabriel. Flight delayed. We'll be home in the morning. Relief washed through her, but it was short-lived. She needed proof. She went to the study, hesitated for a long moment, and then opened the door. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. On the desk were ledgers, a laptop, and the same photograph of his late wife. When she turned on the computer, she did not expect to find what she did: a folder labeled "Accident." Inside were photos from the crash site, legal documents, and an email chain between Gabriel and his lawyer. One line caught her eye. The truth will surface. I cannot live with this anymore. Her hands trembled. The email was dated just 3 days ago. She heard footsteps behind her and turned sharply. Gabriel stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, his eyes dark with exhaustion and pain. I told you not to go through my things, he said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. You have to tell me the truth, Gabriel. Did you cause that accident? For a long time he said nothing. Then his voice broke the silence, low and raw. I did not kill her, Elena, but I should have been the one driving that night. She took the wheel after an argument. I tried to stop her, but she lost control. The guilt has been killing me ever since. Elena's breath shuddered. Then why let people believe you were responsible? Because it keeps them away, he whispered. Because pain is easier than pity. He sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. Now you know everything. She stepped closer, her heart breaking for him. You could have told me sooner. He looked up, eyes tired but honest. I wanted you to see me as I am now, not as the man who failed before. The storm outside roared louder, but the silence between them finally began to thaw. And for the first time, Elena saw Gabriel not as the secretive millionaire or the man in the contract, but as someone human, haunted, and trying to be forgiven. The next morning, the sky was pale and heavy with mist, as if the storm had stolen all the color from the world. Gabriel had barely slept. His confession hung in the air like smoke that refused to fade. He had finally told Elena the truth, but the weight of it had built a wall between them once again. When he came down to breakfast, she was already there, sitting quietly with Ethan. The boy was talking about his school project, waving his hands as he spoke, but Gabriel could see that Elena's smile did not quite reach her eyes. After Ethan left for school, Gabriel poured himself a cup of coffee. "I am sorry about last night," he said quietly. Elena looked up, her voice soft but steady. "You have nothing to apologize for. You told me the truth." "I told you enough to make you see why I do not deserve peace," he replied. She sighed, setting down her cup. "Gabriel, you cannot keep punishing yourself forever. You are a father. Ethan needs you alive, not buried in guilt." He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through the moment. The doorbell rang, sharp and urgent. The housekeeper appeared, looking uneasy. "Sir, there are reporters outside. They are asking about Mrs. Ward and the accident." Gabriel's expression darkened. "What?" Elena stood. "How did they even find out?" Before Gabriel could answer, the door burst open. Marissa Hale walked in, followed by two men in suits and a cameraman. "Smile, Gabriel," she said sweetly. "The world deserves to know the truth about their favorite widower." Gabriel's voice hardened. "You have no right to be here." Marissa handed a document to one of the men. "Actually, I do. These are court papers. A new investigation has been opened about the crash, and your lovely wife here is at the center of it. You see, someone leaked her marriage contract to the press. Quite the scandal." Elena's heart dropped. "You did this?" Marissa's smile widened. "I warned you. Secrets always come out." Gabriel moved closer, his tone deadly calm. "You will leave now before I have you removed." It not be would not a gem, but Marissa only turned toward the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, here stands Gabriel Ward, the man who buried his guilt under a fake marriage to a desperate woman. How noble of him, trying to rewrite his story." The flashes went off, the bright light blinding. Gabriel stepped in front of Elena, shielding her from the cameras. "Get out," he said through clenched teeth. Security finally arrived and escorted Marissa and the reporters out. The house fell silent again, but this time it was filled with something worse than anger, shame. Elena turned to Gabriel, her voice trembling. "They know about the contract. They will twist everything. What will happen to Ethan? And Wonkel bribe?" And for self-sinner, he ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear in his eyes. "I will fix it." "How?" she demanded. "You cannot buy back trust." Gabriel looked at her with a kind of desperate honesty. "Then tell me what I should do." For a moment, she could not answer. She had spent so long trying to guard her heart, but now she saw him standing there, broken, proud, and willing to lose everything just to protect her. "Tell them the truth," she said finally. "Tell them about the accident. Tell them why we married. Let them see you for who you really are." He stared at her, as if weighing the cost of that decision. "If I do that, I lose everything. My company, my reputation." "Then lose it," she interrupted, "because the man standing in front of me is worth more than the empire he built." Silence filled the space between them, heavy but alive. Then Gabriel nodded slowly. "All right, I will do it." That evening, he called his attorney, arranged a press conference, and sent Ethan to stay with a family friend. The mansion that night was empty, except for the two of them. As Gabriel reviewed his prepared statement, Elena approached quietly. "Are you sure?" she asked. He looked up, his voice calm. "I am done hiding. You were right. If I want to protect Ethan and you, the truth must come from me." He reached for her hand, hesitant at first. She let him hold it. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said softly, "thank you for believing there is still something good left in me." Her eyes glistened. "There is more than good, Gabriel. You just forgot where to look." Outside, the mist turned to rain again, soft and relentless. And as the first drop struck the window, they stood together in quiet resolve, knowing that by sunrise, the world would know everything, and that nothing between them would ever be the same again. The following morning arrived gray and restless. News vans lined the front gate of the Ward estate, their satellite dishes pointed toward the mansion like watchful eyes. Gabriel stood by the tall window of his study, the city skyline blurred beyond the rain. His statement lay on the desk in front of him, every word carefully chosen, every truth waiting to be spoken aloud. Elena entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "They are already setting up outside," she said softly. He turned toward her, exhaustion shadowing his face. "Then it is time." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried the weight of everything unsaid, fear, regret, and something fragile but real. Then Gabriel took her hand. "Whatever happens out there, I need you to know I meant every word I said last night. Elena nodded, her throat tight. Just speak the truth, Gabriel. That is all that matters. At 10 o'clock sharp, he stepped out onto the stone steps of the mansion. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of thunder. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted questions, their voices rising like a storm. Gabriel waited until the noise fell quiet, then began. My name is Gabriel Ward, he said firmly. 3 years ago, I lost my wife in an accident that I will regret for the rest of my life. I was not driving that night, but my choices led to the argument that put her behind the wheel. Since then, I have lived with guilt, not because I caused her death, but because I survived it. The crowd fell silent. He continued, his voice steady. Months ago, I entered into a marriage contract with Elena Morris. It began as a legal arrangement to secure custody of my son. But along the way, she reminded me what integrity looks like. She reminded me what it means to live again. A reporter called out, "Are you saying the marriage was fake?" Gabriel looked straight into the cameras. It began as a contract, but what I feel for her is real. The words seemed to hang in the air, raw and undeniable. Flashbulbs erupted, reporters shouted again, but Gabriel simply stepped back. That is all I have to say. The rest will be handled through the court. When he turned to go back inside, the crowd did not jeer or mock. For the first time, there was only silence. A silence that carried respect. Inside the foyer, Elena waited. His suit was damp, his hair clinging to his forehead. She could see the tremor in his hands as he reached for her. "It is done," he whispered. She exhaled, relief and pride mixing in her chest. "You did the right thing." He gave a faint, tired smile. "It feels strange to finally breathe." Hours later, the television networks aired the full speech. Public opinion began to shift. Some still questioned his motives, but others praised his honesty. Ethan returned home that evening, running straight into his father's arms. "I saw you on TV," he said proudly. "You were brave. And the Grotto. Did it have Fowler. And then today." Gabriel laughed softly, hugging him close. "Your mother would have wanted the truth, and you deserve a father who is not hiding anymore." When Ethan went to bed, the house fell quiet again. Gabriel found Elena standing on the balcony, watching the bay shimmer under the evening light. He joined her, the cool wind brushing against them. "You were the reason I could face them," he said. "You believed in me when I could not believe in myself." Elena turned to him, her eyes glistening. "You did not need saving, Gabriel. You just needed someone to remind you that you were still worthy of love." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. From it, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the same gold ring from their wedding, only now the initials EMW were engraved inside. "This time," he said quietly, "no contracts, no rules, just us." Tears filled her eyes. "Gabriel," he took her hand, sliding the ring onto her finger again. "You once said truth matters more than appearances. So, here it is. I love you." The bay wind carried the words away, but their meaning stayed. Elena smiled through her tears, whispering back, "Then I love you too." The two of them stood there as the first lights of evening shimmered over the water, not as strangers bound by paper, but as two souls finally free of their pasts, ready to start a life built not on secrets, but on truth. A few months later, spring returned to the city. The gray skies that once lingered over the Ward estate had given way to sunlight spilling through the windows. The mansion, once filled with silence and ghosts, now carried the sound of laughter and music. In the grand hall, white flowers lined the staircase. Guests moved softly, their conversations low and warm. At the center stood Gabriel, dressed in a classic black suit, his expression calm but filled with something new peace. Today was not a day of contracts or obligation. It was their real wedding day. Ethan adjusted his small tie proudly, standing beside his father. "You look nervous," he teased with a grin. Gabriel laughed quietly. "Maybe a little." "She will come," Ethan said with certainty. "She always keeps her promises." And she did. The doors opened, and Elena appeared at the top of the staircase, wearing a simple ivory gown that glowed under the morning light. She held a small bouquet of lilies, the same flowers she had carried the first time they married, but now they meant something entirely different. This time, her hands did not tremble. Her eyes found his instantly, and everything else in the room faded away. As she walked toward him, memories flooded through both of them. The rain-soaked coffee shop, the signed contract, the lies, the music, the storm, the truth. Every step she took erased a little more of the pain that had once bound them. When she reached him, Gabriel took her hand, holding it gently. The officiant's voice was steady but distant. What mattered was the way Gabriel looked at her. No longer guarded, no longer burdened by guilt. Do you, Gabriel Ward, take Elena Morris not by agreement, but by choice? I do, he said without hesitation. And do you, Elena Morris, take Gabriel Ward not out of necessity but out of love? Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone. I do. I do. Ethan cheered softly, making the guests laugh. The sound broke the solemnity, filling the room with warmth. Gabriel leaned forward and kissed her gently, sealing a promise that needed no signature. After the ceremony, they stood in the garden, where Ethan's sunflowers had begun to bloom. The breeze carried the scent of new life, and petals fluttered across the path. Gabriel wrapped an arm around Elena's shoulders as Ethan ran ahead, chasing the wind. You know, Gabriel said quietly, there was a time when I thought I would never deserve another chance at happiness. Elena smiled up at him. You did not need to deserve it, Gabriel. You just needed to be honest enough to receive it. He looked out at the boy laughing among the flowers. Ethan once asked me what love means. I could not answer him then, but now I think I can. Elena tilted her head. And what did you tell him? That love is not about fixing someone, he said softly. It is about standing beside them while they find their own way back to the light. She reached up and touched his face gently. Then we finally made it there. Did we not? He nodded, resting his forehead against hers. Yes, we did. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a small art exhibition opened downtown. It was called The Promise of Tomorrow. Each painting on the wall told a part of their story. Rain, light, the boy, the lilies, the ring. In the center hung one painting larger than the rest. It showed a man, a woman, and a child standing together beneath a bright sky. The title read, The Contract That Became a Promise. Visitors stopped to stare, unaware that the couple standing quietly in the corner were the ones whose lives had inspired it. Elena slipped her hand into Gabriel's, and he held it tightly. You kept your word, she whispered. He smiled. So did you. Outside, the city lights reflected on the bay, calm and endless. For the first time in years, Gabriel Ward no longer feared the night, and as they left the gallery hand in hand, the world felt new again, proof that even from pain, something beautiful could grow. In the end, their story was not about wealth, contracts, or redemption. It was about courage, the courage to forgive, to love, and to begin again.